Good afternoon. My name is Katya Nikitina. Together with Arseny Zhilyaev, we are the heads of the Contemporary Art Faculty at the Sreda Obuchenia. Allow me to greet you on behalf of our staff. Today it's the opening meeting in the Meetings Without Limits cycle, which will feature contemporary artists, curators, and art theorists. We will have teachers from Sreda Obuchenia as moderators, and the artists and curators talking to us will be talking about subjects that are very important for our agenda, decentralized post-colonial discourses and other subjects that are important for our community. Today's speaker will be Zdenka Badovinac. Next we'll have Franco Berardi, Terry Smith, and next week it's David Jocelyn, Stephen Shagiro, Claire Bishop, and Stellark as the penultimate meeting, and Marina Abramovic will be the final speaker in November. Arseny, over to you. Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm greeting our guests, Ekaterina Lazareva and Zdenka Badovinac, and just a couple of words from me on this cycle. The cycle is really an object of pride for us. We think it's very important to have such an initiative trying to exit this isolation in all senses of the word that is relevant for all of us. It includes cultural isolation, not just physical one. That's why I would like to thank our colleagues from our international department for supporting this initiative, and I'd like to thank all the speakers. And just one thing from me, the cycle was already complete, and we found out that the two speakers at the start and at the end of the cycle are two important female figures from the former Yugoslavia, Eastern Europe. Zdenka Badovinac is the first, Marina Abramovic is the last, and I think it's quite symbolic because the cycle is introduced and wrapped up by important subjects. Feminism is one of them, and the adherence to radical search within art, radical quest, so to say. Each of these artists works in their own field. Marina has become a symbol, an icon of performance art and working with the body, and Zdenka is more about radical experiments within curatorship, within exhibitions, within museums and museum self-organization. For a long time, Zdenka used to be the director of the Moderna galerija, one of the most progressive European museums, and Claire Bishop, who will be featured later, made this gallery as part of her collection Radical Museology. So that's why we're happy to have these meetings arranged in such a way, and I hope that they will be fruitful for us all and will be important part of our context. And now over to Ekaterina Lazareva, who will be moderating the meeting and introducing Zdenka in more detail. Thank you. Have a nice evening. Thank you, Arseny. Good afternoon, good evening. I'm happy to greet everybody watching us right now, all our viewers, and I would like to express my admiration to the structure of this program with so many prominent speakers. I think it's a very important aspect, a live dialogue, keeping it up, keeping it alive, dialogue with the leading figures in artistic practices worldwide. This opportunity arose due to the pandemic in part, but on the other hand, the Sreda Obuchenia school has been working online for a while, so they are the right persons to be at the forefront of these online events. I think it's very good, and their experience is very relevant in this area. And I'm happy to be part of this discussion today. I will be asking questions myself, and I will be reading out questions from the audience. I'm not going to dwell long on Zdenka's biography because it's known to many and it's published on the website. Zdenka Badovinac used to be the director of the Contemporary Art Museum in Ljubljana. She is a curator, an art critic, and author of several books that are concerned with art in Eastern Europe, while the museum is part of the network, L'International, which is a network of contemporary art museums, an important networking structure that organizes exchange of collections and exhibitions, and is, I think, the most interesting, the most cutting edge example of museum work today. Maybe some of our viewers today have seen the NSK exhibition in Garage, curated by Zdenka, and the exhibition The Grammar of Freedom. That was another important show of contemporary Eastern European art in Moscow. And we hope that possibly the exhibition that Zdenka will be talking about today will also visit Russia in the future. And I think it might be apposite to quote another participant of this cycle, Claire Bishop. She wrote about Zdenka's book, one of her most important books, that Claire Bishop wrote that for anybody who is looking for curatorial alternatives to the new liberal museum model with its blockbuster exhibitions, Badovinac and her book are a great source of inspiration. I think that this is a nice beginning, and I'd like to give the floor to Zdenka Badovinac, and she'll be talking to us about curatorial strategies that could be now used against the expansion of blockbuster exhibitions and the leisurely culture. I hope that there will be questions from our viewers in the broadcast chat. I will be reading them aloud to Zdenka. Later on, we'll have about 30 minutes for Q&A after the hour's lecture. Thank you. And now, Zdenka, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Katerina. Thank you, Arseni. It's a great pleasure to be part of the program with so many prominent speakers, and Marina at the end. It's just fantastic because she's also she was part of the exhibition, actually, that I am now going to talk about the exhibition that closed recently on 12th of September, exactly in Rome, in one of the most important museums called Contemporary Art, MAXXI. The title of the exhibition is Bigger Than Myself, Heroic Voices from Ex-Yugoslavia. So I will try to explain not only the things related to the exhibition, but also to my work as a museum director, as a curator in the last almost 3 decades. And also I would like to touch the situation in Slovenia, in Eastern Europe, in global world, of course. So I would like first to, maybe I should go directly to the share screening, because I know it's always interesting to see the images, but where is now my file? Oh, yeah. Let me see. can you see it? No? Now it's there, right? Okay, so yeah, here you can see the facade of Moderna Galerija, the museum that I've been director from '93 to the end of the last year. And I will, as I said, relate it, you know, the ideas of the institution also to the exhibition I did in Rome. So I will try to explain a little bit before I go to the exhibition in Rome. I will try to explain a little bit the basic ideas of the museum that I was involved with, which I think it's very important also to understand the exhibition in Rome. And in general, I think there are some interesting points to understand a museum and the collection as a tool. So the Moderna Galerija was established in 1948, exactly the same year when Yugoslavia split with Soviet Union, in so-called Inform Bureau with Stalin. Probably you are familiar with it. And after it, very soon Yugoslavia developed quite unique model of socialism, much freer than Russian model, I would say, the self-management system. Until 2011, we worked in one building, but then in 2011, we got another venue, another museum actually, that still works under the same umbrella, Museum of Contemporary Art Metelkova, in the former Yugoslav army barracks. So in 91, Yugoslav army left Slovenia and went to Bosnia, and you know, the bloody war started in Slovenia, but then, you know, the serious, very serious thing developed in Bosnia, in Croatia, other countries of former Yugoslavia. So we got the barrack, the new museum venue, because the Yugoslavia fall apart actually. So when we got it, we were somehow forced to conceive the program around the new around this division, and we divided the museum into the big departments: in the Museum of Contemporary Art, in the old original building, and the Museum of so in the original building, the Modern Art Museum, and in the new building, Contemporary Art Museum. So we conceived the idea about what is contemporary, what is modern, what are the differences, and the ideas of the modern and contemporary, especially related to museum and collection, we somehow so the idea were still are reflected in the display of the collection in the main museum, in the Modern Art Museum. There is the central room, for example, that reflects that not only artworks are important for the art museum, but also it is important to present how the collective memory is built. So next to the modern art, we exhibit the socialist realism. On the walls, we explain the main points in the history of 20th century local art system. There are some major events like the two funerals, the funerals of King Alexander of Yugoslavia, and the funeral of Josip Broz Tito in 1980, after which everything went wrong. And of course, you know, it ended in the 90s in the war and new countries were, national countries were founded. And this play ends with the video of Leibach, the Geburt einer Nation, which is somehow the construction of national, I would say, of national art. So it's about the National Museum, but at the same time, you know, Leibach sings in German language. It's their interpretation of one vision of Queens, and probably you know Leibach and the concept of over-identification. I presented NSK in, as it was said before, in Garage, so it's very rich. I would say one of the most important concepts of post-war avant-garde in Eastern Europe, and still very active and important for today. So the collection is the national collection at the beginning proposes two ways, either to go the linear way in terms of linear time from the Impressionism through all those styles that are the styles of, let's say, Western art, or to go directly the line of avant-gardes, the avant-gardes from the 20s, then the partisan art we have in the next room, the conceptual art from the 60s, 70s, and then the NSK in the last room. And this displays ends with war posters from 91. And here actually then the Contemporary Art Museum somehow symbolically starts. This is still the unrenovated building in 2000, where we for the first time presented the first collection on Eastern European art. You see here Russian artists, of course, Kozulapo. And then in 2011, it was renovated, and we started a new story with many important donations, also as donation of Dan Perzhowski, the door you can see easily recognize. It's easy to recognize these artists, and you know, so all this story ended at the end of the last year when the actual government, the right-wing government that started to rule last year in March. So in the 1.5 years, they changed all the museum directors, including me. Of course, our mandate were expired, but at the same time, you know, we all somehow competed to be prolonged, but we didn't. I think that it happened also, at least in our case, because of our attitude to the institution, museum, the ideas what the institution or museum should be. Radical museology vision, as Claire Bishop in her book explained, is not something that actual government would like. So the ideas about the history, especially the history linked to the socialism, to the former country of Yugoslavia, are today treated as, if you speak about them in terms of, you know, kind of, if you find in the history also the emancipatory ideas, and you talk freely about it, they would the government and its followers, they would designate you as the extremist. So me personally, I was also defined as a person who share via the networks of the international art world the extremist political ideas. So you could see my extremism a little bit from my museum work, and you will see it also from the exhibition that I will be talking about. Let's go then to this was very short introduction on the background. I hope you will understand more easily the exhibition in Rome. So for the exhibition in Rome, I conceived the concept that describes two forces that are bigger than us individuals. One is an idea, a value for which one would be willing to die, and it refers to heroism. To the question, what are relevant heroic gestures today? And the other is about the global capital, total power that dominates everything today. So here you can see on the facade of Maxi Museum, this is the wrong title. I don't know how it's not Tanya Ostojic, it's Igor Grubic. Sorry, I don't know how it happened. Yeah, so Igor Grubic work angels, the workers with the angels wings. It's about you know, the situation in former Yugoslavia, the times of transitions, the strikes of the coal miners at the end of the 90s, demonstrations against Milosevic regime. And I think it's also very much about, you know, about these positive values that are important, and then one would still die for, and are present among the workers still today. Okay, and then the beginning of the exhibition, you can see hopefully well the three works, and these three works somehow defined the this concept of the exhibition about the two forces. So here on the floor is the work of young Slovene artist Andrej Škufca. And he tries to visualize actually the global capital. You know, it's a mass of black material. It's like an oil or something like that. And it's, you know, it's a question how to visualize it, how to visualize the power that dominates us today. And the answer, at least through this artwork, is that this is something that actually is impossible to visualize. It's an abstract form which is more about you know, the networks and connection than about something very concrete. And here behind it's the work of Siniša Ilić. It's where he tries to visualize the 100 revolutions from last 100 years, and it's also pretty abstract thing that one can't visualize. It's kind of mapping of the history of revolutionarism. And above the blue line, there are 100 portraits. You will see also, I think I have another better images later, where you will see these are actually the portraits of the 100 or exactly, it's a little bit less than 100 partisan heroes from the Second World War, where the group Irvin, also the member of Neue Slowenische Kunst, they found the portraits in the National Museum in Sarajevo, and they framed them in their own frames, heavy black frames. They wanted to, of course, to spread the message that something that was possible during the Second World War among the partisans, among the revolutionaries also, that go beyond the national divisions today is not possible, because Bosnia is still divided in different ethnic groups, and there are many tensions from the 90s it's still not something that would be comparable with what we have in times of brotherhood and unity, which was one of the main ideology of the former Yugoslavia. So it was actually about these two forces also that, in a way, my directorship in Moderna Galerija was marked. If I were to describe it in one word, that would be comradeship, which is again the title of my book, the book of the essays on the art from Eastern Europe and my institutional work. And so the essays are related in that book mostly to the exhibitions I did in Moderna Galerija and to the vision of museum that together with my colleagues we developed through all those years in Moderna Galerija. The question is, of course, how I defined comradeship. And I developed a certain short formula what the comradeship is. So comradeship is about common interests and goals, friendship and ethics that transcends division in status, expertise, class, race, ethnicity, and gender. Comrades are united intellectually and emotionally. They share active position, the desire to change the things. On the collective level, genuine comradeship means a society of solidarity and participation that we lost. So I grew up and was formed in socialist Yugoslavia. So my understanding of comradeship has been shaped by that context. By my affirmative attitude to its emancipatory impulses, as by the critique, also of course, by the critique of stratified socialist society, red bourgeoisie, and over bureaucratization of the system. So since my teenage years, I've been a member of different various formal and informal communities marked by comradeship. So these different comradeships through, let's say, more than 40 years to today have been opposing the dominant models of life, established culture, commercialization, Balkan War, nationalism, a refugee crisis, historical revisionism, authoritarianism, and loss of society. And exactly this loss of society, which is a broader problem today, it's not related only to my context or your context, but it's in general the problem of the neoliberal global system, is the core. So this loss of society is actually the core of the Bigger Than Myself exhibition. So the exhibition message is that each small gesture that contributes to building of society, of solidarity, is a heroic gesture. So these heroic gestures are, of course, stimulated on this or other way by the two mentioned forces that are bigger than us individuals. So first force is idealistic, the force that inspires us and relates to love and vision of something better and different. And the second force is a pragmatic force that controls and dominates us, and we need to fight against it. So both forces are presented in the logo of the exhibition Bigger Than Myself, designed by George Balmazovic. So this logo represents embraced couple, Bosnian Serb Boško Brkic and Bosniak Admira Izmic, who were shot dead by sniper fire on the Vrbanja bridge in Sarajevo on 19 May in 1993. So according to witness reports, Boško died on the spot while Admira was wounded and crowded to him to die next to him in his arms, so to speak. So it's like Romeo and Juliet story from the war, from the Balkan War. So the logo, this logo marks the boundary between the past and the present, between the time of the socialist Yugoslavia, when we still believe in an idea that was bigger than us, and the time when we also when also the space of former Yugoslavia came under the power of force bigger than any ideas. And of course, this is the force of capital. So within the socialist world, Yugoslavia was always crucially different. I mentioned before the 48, the split with Stalin, and the unique socialist model of self-management system. Yugoslavia was also one of the initiators of the non-aligned movement, which today serves as also as a very important inspiration for the possible alternative global networks. So the country Yugoslavia presented itself in the world with the symbols of peace, liberty, equality, brotherhood between nations, and its non-aligned position, which of course is not the case today. So today the symbols that we and other countries in the former Yugoslavia present are the national symbols actually. Far from being merely empty phrases, these values were constantly implemented with varying degrees of success in social reality. It is this effort to put it in practice, to put into practice progressive values that transcend partial interests, that art from the territory of former Yugoslavia treats as important message from the past, important for all humankind. A message from a time when we still believe that we could be better people, that we could go beyond ourselves and live in harmony with other nations, when we had faith in people's capacity for solidarity with others and the existence of society. By the time Boško and Admira perished in a war started by Serbian aggressors, that faith in ideas more or less successfully embodied in just dissolved Yugoslavia had long died. So after the young couple's death, which symbolizes also the death of society, the present started, a time of cynicism and relativism, the time of individualism, believing they can live, so the time of individuals that believe that they can live without others. So all these elements replaced something that we called before the society. It seemed that after the death of Admira and Boško, we would all become the same members of global capitalist community. The old division between East and West became obsolete. Now we have only, as some of our colleagues say, former West and former East. However, the fact that we did not completely get rid of our Eastern Europeans began to become clear in 2008 with the financial crisis. But what is this Eastern Europeanness that we cannot get rid of. So in one of the recent CIMAM, and CIMAM is, as you know, International Committee for Museums and Collections of Modern Art. So in one of their letters, they have this museum watch when they, try to point to the urgent matters in the museum world. So in one of their letters, its authors defined the situation in Eastern European cultural institutions as marked with the old habits of political interfering. So my own experience of working in the central state institution has been about the constant fights with the authorities of different political orientations. So actually, none of these policies have succeeded in building a modern cultural system, let's say, based on professional criteria and relative autonomy of cultural institutions. So this is also my explanation why, for example, in Slovenia, where nobody expected such a shift to the right and interference in the institution. So my answer is, of course, that something like that could happen because we were not protected by the really developed modern cultural system. So the influence of the profession and experts on functioning of institutions and the position of artists in Slovenia was drastically reduced with the appearance of a new government led by the right-wing Janez Janša's party. So in Slovenia, the cultural ministry and the state is the most important financer, and so we are all depending on it. And the cultural minister functions as a father figure because whatever he now it's he. We also had she's. So, but the actual one, the member of the Janez Janša party, he changed the rules. For example, for the operation of the expert groups at the ministry. So the expert groups are the groups of the experts who proposes the, how the artists, how the NGOs, how the institutions should be financed. So the minister actually assigned himself the role of the final decision maker. He also began to amend the founding acts, the statuses of cultural institutions, especially in parts concerning the criteria for directors, so they adapted to their preferable candidates. Among other things that CIMAM letter says, and I quote here, in the past few years, the so-called illiberal political model applied by governments in countries like Poland, Hungary, now expands through the region, deeply affecting cultural communities there. Politics in these countries has seemingly returned to the old habits of interfering with both recruiting policies and content management of the state-founded institutions. So how to understand then this, again, this return to Eastern European habits? It will be very interesting to hear from you, Russians. What are your experience? I know we always discussed, how the Russians feel and share the similar feelings of being Eastern Europeans, and the questions of the identity are not so relevant today, but the questions of the politics and these Eastern European habits of interfering are very, very actual and very relevant today to talk about. So in Slovenia, this seems like a shock we weren't prepared for, but did the old habits return really happened all at once and because of one autocrat we call Janez Janša. Of course, the autocrat, as we call your president and other like Orban, you know, who is very near to our prime minister. All of those people we call autocrats. But so just after the collapse of socialist regime in Eastern Europe, we witnessed the catching up revolution. Eastern European countries were imitating the Western values and institutions. So way of learning and the Western model of learning and working. All these processes were defined as democratization, liberalization, globalization, and so forth. But liberalism in 1990s was closely related to nationalism. A Bulgarian political scientist, Ivan Krastev, says that nationalists and liberals were allies of the overthrow of communism in 1989. And I quote him here: appealing to national sentiment was critically important as a way of mobilizing society against the communist regime. This alliance between nationalists and liberals came to an end during the Yugoslav war. After the war, the liberals had to prove themselves with the success of economic reforms and not anymore with the nationalist symbols. By the 2010 Central and Eastern European versions of liberalism had created social inequality, pervasive corruption, and morally arbitrary redistribution of public property into the hands of small number of people. The financial crisis in 2008 greatly weakened the reputation of neoliberalism and the belief that Western elites knew what they were doing. According to Krastev, this is why 2008 had such a shattering ideological, not merely economic effect. In public, such distrust of Western financial capitalism was presented as even greater than it really was, in order to cover up corruption and abuse of power and power at home. And I would also relate it to the recent populism and so on. Today, Orban claims that the West is in decline. Russia, Turkey, China finally began to wake up and became the example of strong leaders who advocate a society of traditional values, nationalism, and patriarchalism. Last year, almost at the same time when we got the COVID, it was in March last year, we got this Slovene version of Hungarian leader, Janez Janša, who is a perfect example of nationalist liberal alliance from the end of the 80s that lasts to today. So the epidemic that became an excellent, like everywhere, an opportunity for escalation of hate speech, stricter immigration policies, and new pressure on the media and cultural institutions, and critical contemporary art, which has been strongly involved in actual anti-government protests. Critically minded intellectuals and artists are increasingly facing punishment, populism, and patriarchal values have been strengthened. All this was soon followed by protests. So in Slovenia, just after we got that government, I think it was on the 1st of May last year, the protests on the bicycles, you know, on the bicycles to protect because of the social distance, of course, started, and they have been lasting to today, and then they are continuing. We have bicycles in the streets every Friday. So the demonstrations are aimed against the current government, corruption, police violence, militarization, capitalism, of course, and the environmental distractions. All sorts of people, different generations can be found among the protesters, but its representatives are anti-capitalist bloc, the anarchists, Antifa, who give the demonstration a particular tone. A kind of core group who also see who designed the visual image, let's say, of the protest, are the workers in culture task group. So the individuals are anonymous because of the security reasons, of course. So these actions have been there. So the as I said, as the protests are on the bicycle also became a symbol of the protests, and it appears in many different versions through on the transparents, but also on the graffiti. Here you can see one of the most beautiful graffiti along the small river Gradaščica. Actually, it's a channel of 500 meters and 220 bicycles. So I was so much inspired with this beautiful graffiti that I asked the anonymous artists, the activists, to do something for the exhibition in MAXXI. And here you can see they send the stencils, and in MAXXI the installation was installed still in times of the COVID. It was not possible to travel for the artists, so the bicycles are all around, were all around the exhibition, and it was very important message and actualization of the exhibition and definition of also of contemporary, most recent heroes. So earlier this year, the Mladina magazine, which is the most important Slovene and most critical with a long history magazine, discovered. So the magazine Mladina discovered a letter sent by the Slovene ambassador to Rome to our foreign ministry, where he was appalled by the fact that a central national institution such as Moderna galerija was preparing an exhibition with the artists from common Yugoslav state. Among this exhibition, so actually, although this exhibition was not really the Moderna galerija project, I was invited as a guest curator, but he pretended he didn't know about it. So he used the exhibition as a tool to condemn the critical artist and curator, and the fact that, you know, there is the exhibition related to Slovene curators and artists in the central institution in Rome, with where are also the Yugoslav artists. So for his nationalist feelings, that was too much, especially in the year, this year when Slovenia celebrates 30th anniversary of independence, and when Slovenia became also the took presidency in European Union. So the similar distinction that distances itself from the common Yugoslav space with which Moderna Galerija is supposed to cooperate too much has already been heard by the experts from the expert groups in the Ministry of Culture, and also from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So the common denominator of all criticisms that have been aimed at Moderna Galerija and me in recent months, especially by the governmental structures and the people close to them, is that program of Moderna Galerija, at least the program, conceived by me, which is actually, also this year program is still mine, as normally we send the program each October. So it is the program conceived last year in October. So the reason that he was critical about the exhibition, and also not only he, but also those other people around the ministers, was simply that they condemned the exhibition as to turn to the history. It means to the past, like Yugoslav past, the Second World War, heroes, the worker heroes, and so on, which one could find at the exhibition. So in general, the cultural ministry and actual government treats the program as it was, at least in Moderna Galerija, as in a way too dusty, because of the fact that there are Yugoslav exhibitions that we speak about socialism, that we try to put the things in the context. So what the way of support at the ministry at the moment is either something that is very nationalist, or something that is related to the new technology, computers, and so on. So it's not about technology that we all find important, and we all put the actual contemporary technology also in political, economic context. But what they support is mostly, the playful technology, the technology without the context, without any critical dimension, without the past. So everything became like superficial without history, but what comes from the history should be only the history that relates to the this conservative tradition, nationalist tradition, or everything what is socialist or relates to the partisans and anti-fascist struggles from the Second World War became defined as extremist, something that should be we should get rid of. And that representatives from Eastern Europe, it's not only about Slovene attitude, but in European Parliament, some of the representatives proposed the equalization between swastika and red star. So there are a lot of ideas how to get how to make socialism equal to fascism at the moment. And I think this is also I myself find in this frame and my problems and the problems of my colleagues in Moderna Galerija, I think they come from this ideological frame. And I would define the model of the institution that my colleagues and me strived for, at least until recently, as a situated model of the museum. So the situated means actually for me to be to work with the contents that are take stand. So I think that the institution should be positioned. It should take critical stand towards one past, present, and future. A Biggern myself exhibition is exactly about this positioning. It speaks about local histories and socio-political tradition, about their emancipatory potentials, and also about their deviations about global capitalism, the post-human condition, and on our return to authoritarianism as well. So the situatedness and positioning of the exhibition are discussed or were discussed in 8 sections of the exhibition. And so the 4 sections were about the values that are positive values, the values that one would die for example, freedom, equality. So you can see here some examples from these first 4 chapters with the Lenin quotes from, we wrote Lenin's monument in Petersburg, and this is a reference to it by the Croatian artist Dalibor Martinez. And then you can see Irvin work now better than, when I first show it, the heroes, the original works from the 50s, the paintings framed in typical heavy, it's about the appropriation, NSCAL appropriation model. And below it's the revolver by Lana Tmaichanin, the revolver that was used in the First World War, and it's also the model that Gavrilo Princip, that assassinated huge Duke, the Austro-Hungarian Duke in Sarajevo, and that's how the First World War started. So the other chapters are also the equalities part of it. You can see Vlasta Delimar riding the horse at the end of this image in the streets of Zagreb, for example. And then Darinka Popmitic with a mural that depicts the life of one woman from Kosovo by Albanian Muslim origin, her transformation in socialism. She put the veil off her head and became very contemporary and very politically engaged person. And then a young George Jovanovic, Macedonian artist, who proposed an active monument with a loudspeaker with different songs and texts, and it's of course women heads. And then the Brotherhood Syria, it's about the different ethics of workers in socialism comparing to what we got today. And then the chapter of liberty, of freedom, with George Balmazovic, calendar with different heroes he found in the history and contemporary times. And then we have 4 other chapters that are more the chapters that we would not die for, but they are results of the global capitalism, let's say individualism. On the right of the screen, there is an image of one of Janez Janša's, 3 artists in 2006, when we already had this guy, Janez Janša, the prime minister. They renamed officially in his name, and they changed all the documents. And so this is very interesting, critical and politically engaged art project. And then the video with the swimming pool of Vladimir Nikolic. And so there is also risk, of course, you know, as one of the consequences of global capitalism and so on. So all those artworks are grounded, of course, in the local experiences, but all of them are also related to the contemporary global society. So when we talk about the East, we usually have in mind the socialist East. And here we must point out its two sides, the two sides of socialist East. It's idealism, so idea for which we were prepared to die, and its deviation into authoritarianism or even dictatorships in some of the socialist countries we know. I would say in our case we had the impulses of totalitarianism and dictatorship, but it was not comparable what you had in Russia, Soviet Union, or Romania, for example, or Albania. But today, the return to the East today actually means, unfortunately, above all, the dark side of this bigger than myself, the authoritarianism. So in the absence of great ideas for which we would be willing to die for today, it seems that nothing can really save us from the forces that want to dominate and control us. Then this dark side of of myself has finally and totally won. So the exhibition Bigger Than Myself seeks a way out in the many critical thoughts and through raising awareness of the situation in which we find ourselves. It is true that the exhibition speaks primarily of this duality hidden in the title Bigger Than Myself, the duality between the ideal and the pragmatic, but at the same time it overcomes this duality with bringing into its narrative the third element. Here it should be emphasized that both aspects, idealistic and pragmatic ones, are explicitly human. However, this is only in appearance, as the third force, a non-human voice of nature, is present throughout the exhibition. You saw before there are plants where it was Nada Prlja. This is the beginning of the exhibition. For example, there is a lot of nature all around the exhibition. So this is the entrance with Nada Prlja. And then we recognize the voices of nature, for example, in the work of Marta Popivoda and Anna Vujanovic, Bodyscape Women in Battle, and some other on the historical heroes. So the work of Vujanovic and Popivoda is actually the interview. Here you see the poster, and I choose to present the poster because the poster is about a figure, and behind it, it's a landscape. It's a kind of cubistic landscape where the figure became part of it. So it is very much about treating the landscape, especially the forests where the partisans' homes when they were living and fighting against the occupator. So the forest actually was treated as a comrade, the same as you know, the human comrade. Yeah. So there are also other works in the section of metamorphosis that relate to these non-human non-human aspects. For example, the work of Maya Smrekar, The Hybrid Family, which speaks of the fact that we can no longer think about the community only as a human community. She gave breastfeeding to the dog, the member of her family. So she artificially somehow provoked to have a milk, and then she can eat the dog. And then Marietica Potrč with a series of 3 drawings that visualize and conceptualize the agency of rocks, microorganisms, and humans on Earth. And then also Marko Pogačnik, the member of the legendary group OHO, the old, let's say, conceptual artist, made a new series of drawings that present the heroes that are not only human beings, but he considers also the plants, the animals, the different creatures from the nature as being heroes as well, because they contribute, to our survival as well. So, but from the point of view of our topic, the topic that is more, about repetition of old Eastern European patterns of non-freedom, of interfering, political interfering. So I think that the last work I will present here is probably the most complex and most interesting, and this is the work of Jože Barši. So the work refers to the long-running controversy about the crumbling stadium built in 1930s by the most famous Slovene architect Jože Plečnik. So in private investors' plans to rebuild the Plečnik Stadium, the most of the spaces area are planned for the commercial activity. It's typical commercial gentrification context of that stays behind this renovation. So the disputes about the stadium renovation have been going on for more than 10 years, during which time the stadium has overgrown with grass. The artist Jože Barši, who sees a particular beauty in this overgrown condition, and he's proposing that the owners should be allowed to build whatever they want, but around the stadium, not inside, so long as they leave the interior of the stadium overgrown as it is at the moment, because he sees it's so specifically beautiful. So he at the MAXXI exhibition, he presented the photo, the image of the actual situation at the stadium, but also he exhibited another photographs and some discussions from the media. So the most interesting is the part of this documentation is the image of the Slovene Home Guard under the command of General Leon Rupnik, who on Adolf Hitler's birthday in 1944 gave the outtaking of at this stadium. So not long after the war, Leon Rupnik was condemned to death and executed. And last year, more than 7 decades later, the Supreme Court of Slovenia annulled the Rupnik verdict and sent the case back to the Ljubljana District Court. Rupnik's story is just another chapter that reveals the deep divide between the descendants of the left and the right in the countries of former Yugoslavia. The divisions surrounding the renovation of the Plečnik Stadium, meanwhile, reflect not so different antagonism between those who advocate a society of the commons and those who support neoliberal interests. Varshi proposals turn stadium into a monument that reminds us that everything is transitory. Also, his installation in Maxi, where as you saw, there was also, I don't have that image of it, the organizer saw the grass. It was part of the installation. But the Barshi didn't talk about the nature in some kind of romantic point of view, but he left the resolution of the human, so he didn't want to leave the resolution of the problems that he somehow named to the nature, let's say, let's put it this way. But more than that, he tried to break an illusion that people have the reality under their control. So in conclusion, let me say that Bigger Than Myself exhibition of two and one forces that characterize our work, idealistic and pragmatic human force and non-human force, in a view of which it is high time to rethink our comradeship and in general our society, which cannot be a society if it's not based on comradeship. And this can only be a comradeship which also includes non-human agency. Okay, so I stop here.
Zdenka, большое спасибо за...
Zdenka, thank you so much for this beautiful presentation, this interesting talk. We have got lots of questions arising in our minds, but I don't see any actual questions in the chat, so that's why I will start with my own.
Okay.
I would like to begin with a simple question. How was the Maxi exhibition received in Italy in the context of European politics?
Very good question. It's interesting that there were a lot of journalists, but the journalists who were more, interested in the field between the culture and politics. So there were people who knew a lot about the history of former Yugoslavia, the war. There was one pretty famous journalist, Gigi Riva, who wrote an excellent article about the exhibition for Italian Espresso. And, it provoked a lot of discussion. Also, they organized a meeting there with the people involved in the politics between Italy and Yugoslavia. And, we are neighbors. And also, I didn't talk about the works at the exhibition that deals with the questions of the border. There is, for example, one beautiful work by Anja Medved about the border, about the new city in terms of the city that was built after the war, like a typical socialist city, Nova Gorizia. So after the war, the town Gorizia belonged to Italy, and in Yugoslav part, they built a new Gorizia, and there are many intimate and personal stories, you know, how people who were divided after it into countries, relatives, you know, friends, live together, and what happened after, you know, the European Union, when the border again was disappeared and so on. So, you know, but there are also critical points in some of the works. And for example, there is a work of one Croatian artist about the elderly women from Croatia who try uh, to to make some money working in Italy, helping people, you know, accompanying them and so on. Yeah, and I was told, you know, that the exhibition for Italian standards were kind of pretty political, because in Rome, in Italy in general, I don't know, maybe this is the moment in their art or exhibition making or art system, that they are maybe not so much directly engaged in this kind of questions. So it was a kind of good thing, I think.
Спасибо. И
Thank you so much. As far as I understand, this exhibition actually stands out in terms of the way you construct, initiate a conversation on the present that's accepted commonly in Italy. And it was seen as a diagnosis, perhaps, of some future for European issues and challenges that Europe is perhaps going to come up against in the near future. What I found curious is there are two comments that we see in the chat. Those that continue to watch our stream, please, if you have any questions, I urge you to ask those in our chat. The comments talk about the European identity, like one of the comments from Sophia. It's in English. I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to translate it into Russian. No, well, I guess it's better if I read it in English and the interpreter will translate it back to Russian.
From Sophia, a comment. As a Russian who studies Eastern European culture as master's major, it's hard for me to say how often we can refer to ourselves as Eastern Europeans at all. I believe in Moscow, most of the people consider themselves as Europeans, but if you start asking people where they support European values, it wouldn't be quick yes. Комментарий в ответ, комментарий от Веры на русском.
And there is a comment from Vera in response to that. It's in Russian. She says that, well, Europeans is perhaps not a relevant term because it undermines national culture. And in the 2000s, a lot of the countries voiced their opinions on this, like, I want to be French, I want to be Polish, I want to belong to a local culture, not the European culture. Why does European necessarily mean that you're erasing national identities? And being European is something that erases national identities. And this exhibition, bigger than me, myself, I think it touches upon these questions as well. And perhaps, Zdenka, you could comment on this. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. These are relevant questions that, you know, also I'm often asked because, you know, all my bigger part of my career deals with these Eastern European issues. But I always have to say that when I talk about Eastern European context, I'm almost never referring to Eastern European identity or like it would be any national identity, but it's mostly about our common experience with the recent past and transition and whatever is today. I think that we can share many things despite of big differences, especially in times of socialism. I mentioned 2 or 3 times how Yugoslavia experience of socialism was very different. So, you know, for me, was important to consider when I was invited to do the exhibition on Balkan, whatever art. And then I said, you know, that's a tricky thing, because, you know, to work with the regions, especially Balkan, there were already before some exhibitions done on Balkan, and mostly they exoticized Balkan. And we know how it's difficult, how difficult it is to avoid the commodification of the region, you know, from the part of the Western museum or any Western element of the art system. So I had this in mind when I conceived the concept. You know, the first of all, I said I have to be clear here that everybody understands that it's not about a region which is completely different than the rest of the world. So I wanted to make an exhibition with the topics that most of the world, the global world, share. So I wanted to, let's say, to pick up the universal moments from the history. You know, the already the values that I named: the brotherhood, freedom, you know, equality. All those values are not specifically regional Eastern European values. But I wanted to emphasize the specific experience with those values in times of war, Second World War, in times of socialism, in times of transition, and today in times of authoritarian regime. Also, you know, all those points in the history of our region were not isolated from the whatever was happening in Europe or in the rest of the world. Also, you know, what we have today in Eastern Europe, in Central Eastern, or also in Russia, this new authoritarianism is not isolated from other phenomena that rule the world today. You know, so these are very important things. When I spoke about situated museum and situated curatorial practices, I wanted to emphasize, you know, that you always have to have clear point of utterance, you know, that you should make clear which point you speak from, you know, where is your location. But at the same time, we know that we live in connected world, that you can't talk only about these specific local experiences, and that the local is becoming exactly because of this new conservatism and authoritarianism, again, a pejorative word. That's why I rarely use this word, and I prefer to use the word situated for our experience, which is not universal, which is not, you know, from all of us. It's not abstract international experience, but it is related to specific context, but again also connected to the global world. So it's more complex. We can't talk about Eastern Europe as an isolated region. It never was. Also in times of socialism, also in Russia or other Eastern European countries that were like rather isolated, there were elements that were also the elements of the Western capitalism, the market economy, you know, for example. All those things are important, or pop culture. You know, it's something that you can't neglect. Of course, it is everything there when you talk about Eastern Europe. But you know how Eastern Europe thinks about Hollywood films. It's different than how American people think about Hollywood films.
Говоря из России, не могу не задать вопрос.
Talking from Russia, I have to ask this question. Your book about post-socialist Europe, Do you think Russia is a part of this post-socialist Europe or not? And are you watching what's happening with the Russian creative artistic context? Do you think there are any coincidences in its agenda with the artists that you mostly work with in your exhibition in particular? Because a lot resonates and it seems like there's a lot of common elements, but perhaps there are some distinct differences as well that you can point out in our contexts.
Sure. I think not only Slovenia or post-Yugoslav territory is part of, or Central Europe part of post-socialism. It's the global condition. You know, post-socialism it doesn't relate only to the ex-socialist world. It's something that relates to the also to the West. It's a new condition because we lost the alternative, you know, as Margaret Thatcher said. Yeah, I think that, yeah, I know a little bit about Russian art, of course, and I know some artists that share the similar interests as many post-Yugoslav artists at the moment, especially as for the history, the social history, the amnesia, the erosion of these parts of the history. I know people in Russia who tries to work with a specific Russian Marxism, with you know, things that are not so discussed in official world, let's say, today, and that are very socially and politically engaged. But I also know artists from Russia who are dealing with the technology, with media, as the artists, their peers all over the world, you know. And whenever I see this kind of work, I always say, but what is specific here? You know, I'm always interested in, you know, whenever you deal with global phenomena, there always should be something that is specific. So this is always my curiosity that tries then to discover what is behind there, not as in terms of any national identity or whatever, but you know, each specific context has its own logic, how this global phenomenon reflect in the local situation, let's say.
Я думаю, что многие мои коллеги, ну, я тоже
Katerina, I think a lot of my colleagues and myself in Ljubljana, in the museum, we saw a model of what we need to construct in Russia to recreate it here, the museum strategies that are a model for us. So we looked at all of these international exhibitions. So your presentation today, very dramatic, and of course very serious, very intense. It makes you think. And I guess my question would be, do you have an answer to this question? How today, in a context of a very conservative, neoliberal situation, how does an institution continue to remain critical, remain smart, intellectual? How do you continue to make politically engaged exhibitions? Or do you think we've lost that chance?
No, we didn't lose that chance. That chance always exists, but you know, there are moments when it seems that we lost it, and I think this is the moments in the moment of our institution at the moment. But I think when you know, when it seems that nothing is possible, there are always ways out, and I think that it is very important first to work together with your international alliances. For example, for Moderna Galerija, and it was mentioned before I think Katerina, you mentioned the Internationale, the Confederation of the Museums, where Moderna Galerija is also part. Actually, we initiated it in Ljubljana in 2010, and already, you know, the name, it's l'International, it's the workers' anthem, you know, it refers directly to this emancipatory history and so on. And, you know, we collaborate together, and they are very supportive, and you know, they give the colleagues kind of shelter in the situation when it seems that things are not possible. So I think that for the institution, it's very important, at least, you know, for the curators, it depends what is concrete situation. But there are always people in the institution, right? Good people. And I think that it's important that those people have always a shelter, you know. Sometimes I call it a crypt. And now I speak a lot about the Cryptic Museum. Maybe next time I can say a little bit more about it. But this is kind of shelter in difficult times.
Да, это очень интересно было бы обсудить подробнее. У нас появилась, на самом деле...
Yes, this could be very interesting to discuss. And now we have got several questions from our listeners. Alexander is asking us, I see the EU as a socialist project that also predisposes Brexit and explains it. Don't you think so? That is a socialist project?
No, I think it's a neoliberal project. But there are, you know, elements of socialism, of course, you know. Whenever we refer to the social state, you know, we call it like, you know, the state that has developed medical system, school system, the kindergartens, all this infrastructure that is public, you know. So these are the elements of the socialism. And which state in Europe has developed the public systems, parts of public subsystems the most? Those countries are on the way to be more socialist. Probably Germany, northern countries are ruling here. But as a project, European Union, no, I think it's not. It has many, you know, positive sides, but also, you know, it is also about protecting the European values and European culture, sometimes, you know, without reflecting the fact that there are many non-Europeans in Europe at the moment, and that the Europe is rapidly changing, actually.
И еще один вопрос от Александра.
And one more question from the same listener. The political component of art goes to the foreground. Has it been like this all the time, or is it just a modern trend? Shouldn't we reconsider the term art itself in the new world?
Yeah, it is a trend. I agree. It is a trend. But you know, we always have to consider the individual art project, you know, before judging it with, you know, being a trend or not. So there are good and bad political, let's call it like that, political artists. But I think, you know, for me, it's important that art is somehow, as I used the word before, situated. It doesn't mean explicitly political, but, you know, the artwork has to have its place, its a voice. It should speak from somewhere and from somebody. It has to have a body. You know, this is important for me. It's not about, you know, advocating any political ideas necessarily. I'm always in favor of emancipatory political ideas, of course, but, you know, it doesn't mean that these ideas are explicitly socialist or communist always. It can be also about different knowledges that are important, indigenous knowledges that are extremely important today, and how to incorporate these knowledges in the contemporary world. One of the crucial issues today is, of course, environment. So how to deal with the environment. So what can socialism, for example, do here? How it can help us? Can we learn more from our, I don't know, traditional knowledges or from this political history? These are important questions as well. So it's I think that the artist or the curator, doesn't matter, has to be engaged. It has to have a position, has to know what one wants to do with the if it's only about career and use political art to be more visible, because we know there is documentary Venice Biennale or whatever that tries to present people from everywhere, and mostly political artists. I'm now simplifying, of course. And then the artists try to please and to adapt. This is not the right way. And after some years or decades of artistic career, it becomes very important how faithful one is to his or her ideas from the beginning. When you see individual artistic career, the body of his or her work, then you, through the years, then you always think, what is the link? What is this content that connects all those different periods in individual life? There has to be a position, which is not a position of daily politics or whatever. There is something more, the position to the life, to the world, to the planet.
Еще такой вопрос.
Another question that we've got from the listeners. The art that you showed us today creates an idea of a representation or a reflection on social and political processes. Do you know artworks that had influenced social and cultural processes in a large scale, did not reflect upon them, didn't represent them, but changed them?
You mean concretely who influenced these concrete artworks from former Yugoslavia territory? This was the question about the tradition of the works?
Если я правильно понимаю вопрос,
if I understood the question that we got from the listener right, then the question is that the art cannot just represent or reflect the existing agenda, but do the opposite, influence the cultural processes by itself through its artistic means.
Yeah, I think, there is I think one of great statements of Mladen Stilinovic, he is the artist who I would like to quote all the time. And I think that there is one statement of him. He says, there is no art without consequences. So whatever you do has consequences. So I don't know, maybe this tells a lot. Whatever you do, although if you are neutral and you think your work is not related to any complicated social context, it makes consequences exactly through this seeming neutrality. Because it becomes a tool of some dominant forces or whatever. And if you fight against, it's again another story. I think there is always an impact.
Спасибо.
Thank you. The next question from our listener Tamara. The heroic ideas of social realism are currently seen as false and not frank. How is the theme of heroism seen in contemporary art, and do you find it interesting?
Oh, that was the big question of the exhibition. Can we, because the heroism is not popular anymore. David Bowie, it was end of the 70s when he issued that album, Heroes. And then, we have many songs, Tina Turner, I don't know, whomever, No More Heroes, So it's all the popular culture and art in last 40 years is against heroes. And now suddenly there is an exhibition that tries to promote heroes. It's a strange thing, but exactly because of that, I think it's important to rethink what is heroic, if there is something heroic in ourselves, or we just need to to satisfy with the idea that we are just an average creature, that we are just the objects of some forces, and that we can't fight. So I think that one of the messages of the exhibition is also somehow to recreate this idea and this wish in us individuals, to do something, to contribute. And the answer is, that each small gesture that contributes to the society, and the society is only the society of solidarity. There is no society without solidarity. So this is then the answer. Of course, here I am not talking anymore about these big heroes as are represented in Russian or any other socialist realist works. We know about it, but it's also important to revisit also that monuments, I think, and to think about heroes of the works, and the work in terms of these big exaggerated images was celebrated. Today we don't celebrate the work anymore. These are important questions. Nothing is just to be erased. Let's forget the heroes. It's not simply like that. I think that each thing which seems to be a part of the history should be somehow revisited. And we have all these whistleblowers, Assange and many other, Snowden, who are heroes. They risk their lives.
Спасибо. Еще вопрос.
Thank you. One more question that we got. Without the name, but this listener asks, I found the subjects and problems that you highlighted in this exhibition very topical and very relevant. Was it hard to promote this exhibition in Europe? Did you face political resistance or criticism from your colleagues? And furthermore, artists highlight problems. Do they suggest solutions? Do they have a perspective from above the situation, or do they look for the golden mean, for the middle?
I mentioned before the problems with the Slovene ambassador to Rome, who condemned the exhibition and provoked a big scandal here in Slovenia. For a month or two, I was constantly in media, and it was a big deal, especially it was condemned from the nationalists here in Slovenia because of the fact that the show presented the artists from the former Yugoslavia, and not only because of their different nationalities, but also because former Yugoslavia was a socialist country. So I think there were two reasons why the exhibition had so many problems here, and I believe it could be very similar in other former Yugoslavian countries, because all around that region, the dominant politics is similar. It's quite reactionary. And the other question about do they propose the solution? For example, Jože Barši proposed very concrete solution in the last work that I proposed, to leave the stadium with grass, without any intervention in it. It's very metaphorical, but also very, concrete proposal. And there are artists as Maya Smrekar with the dog. She actually lives with the dog and treats the dog. Many people live with the dog from ever, but it's important that you live with the animals with the awareness that they are part of the family, and that this is not only the microcosmos, but it should be brought to the broader level. It is very much about micro and macro politics. How you think about the non-human creatures in terms of one macro politics. What is our attitude to the environment and other creatures from the nature. It's very against this anthropocentric position.
Спасибо. Ну, похоже, что у нас закончились вопросы.
Thank you. Looks like we are out of questions. I guess we covered them all, approaching the end of our session. I just wanted to say that it seems to me that this exhibition is incredibly powerful in an existential sense, because on the one hand, it talks about very pragmatic things that are bigger than us, and at the same time, very idealistic matters. And initially, it seemed like it's very pessimistic, although a realistic view on things. Then later you start to feel that it brings you power, gives you an understanding that there's something bigger than you that you can rely on, and that you can rely on for support, and that you can unite with, unite your forces. And in this sense, I no longer see it as romantic or realistic. Well, it is both. It is both romantic and realistic, and I think it makes you think. And I think it's a very intense, powerful exhibition. Thank you so much for talking about it.
Thank you for listening. It was a pleasure.
Большое спасибо, Зdenka. Мы надеемся.
Thank you so much, Zdenka. We're really hoping to see you in Moscow very soon.
Yeah, me too. And thank you for all your questions. They were very important.
Спасибо большое всем, кто
Thank you so
задавал.
much to all those who asked questions today. Thank you so much for watching the stream. Please continue to monitor our events. Have a great evening, everybody.